March 8, 1979. Brooklyn, New York. A white 1979 Cadillac Fleetwood left a residential street in broad daylight. Inside were Louis Cafora and his wife Joanna. They were never seen again. No witnesses came forward. No phone calls were made. No bodies were recovered. The car itself vanished. Louis Cafora was not some random civilian who crossed the wrong person. 3 months earlier, on December 11, 1978, the Lufthansa cargo terminal at JFK Airport was robbed of more than $6 million in cash and jewelry. It was the largest cash robbery in American history at the time. Jimmy Burke organized it. Tommy DeSimone helped execute it. Henry Hill facilitated connections. And Louis Cafora was part of the financial cleanup. He wasn't one of the masked gunmen inside the cargo building. His role came afterward. Louis owned parking lot businesses in Brooklyn that functioned as fronts. Cash-heavy operations, perfect for laundering large amounts of untraceable money. Burke trusted him with that responsibility. That trust was based on history. Louis and Burke had done time together in federal prison years earlier. In that world, shared prison time builds loyalty. It creates bonds that feel permanent. After Lufthansa, those bonds became leverage. Within weeks of the heist, Jimmy Burke began eliminating anyone connected to it who posed even the slightest risk. One by one, crew members disappeared. Some were found shot execution style. Others were never found at all. Louis Cafora watched this happen. He knew what it meant. By early March 1979, the pressure around the Lufthansa case had intensified. The FBI had active surveillance near Robert's Lounge. They were tracking purchases, vehicles, spending patterns. Burke had given strict instructions. Lay low. Don't spend conspicuously. Don't draw attention. Don't talk. Louis did the opposite. On March 8th, he and Joanna got into that white Cadillac and left their apartment. Some believe he had been summoned to meet Burke. Others believe he was intercepted before he ever arrived. What is certain is this. After that morning, there were no confirmed sightings of either of them. No confirmed financial activity. No verified phone contact. No recovery of remains. Just absence. Goodfellas shows you the Christmas party, the car, the look on Jimmy Burke's face. It doesn't show you what came next. It doesn't show you that within 3 months of that party, of the man who bought that Cadillac and the woman sitting beside him were erased. And the car that symbolized celebration became the last thing anyone ever associated with them. To understand why Louis Cafora disappeared, you have to understand who he really was and what he did after the heist. Because the Cadillac wasn't the reason, it was the signal. Louis Cafora grew up in South Ozone Park, Queens. It was the kind of neighborhood where everyone knew each other, and a significant number of the men had some connection to organized crime. Social clubs weren't just places to drink, they were offices. Business was discussed openly, but never directly. Cafora wasn't a made member of the Lucchese family, he was an associate. That meant he earned, he followed orders, he had access, but no formal protection. What made Cafora valuable wasn't violence, it was money. By the mid-1970s, he was involved in marijuana and cocaine distribution. Not street-level dealing, wholesale quantities. The kind of operation that required connections and discretion. More importantly, he owned parking lot businesses in Brooklyn, cash-heavy businesses, perfect for laundering money. If you run a parking lot that processes hundreds of small transactions daily, you can blend illegal cash into legitimate revenue without obvious discrepancies. That's what made Cafora useful after Lufthansa. Jimmy Burke needed someone who could clean large amounts of cash without attracting immediate IRS scrutiny. Cafora had the infrastructure, but their relationship went deeper than business. Years earlier, Burke and Cafora had served time together in federal prison on unrelated charges. Prison builds a specific kind of loyalty. When two men share a cell, share food, share risk, it creates trust that's difficult to replicate on the outside. Burke believed Cafora was loyal. That belief mattered. After the December 11th heist, millions in untraceable cash had to be moved carefully. Some would go to higher-ranking figures. Some would be distributed among the crew. Some would be hidden. Cafora became part of that process. He wasn't the mastermind. He wasn't giving orders. But he knew enough. He knew who was involved. He knew where money was flowing. He knew the scale of what had happened. That knowledge was power. And in Burke's world, knowledge without rank was dangerous. There was another issue. Cafora was not subtle. He was heavy-set, loud, social. He liked attention. He liked to talk. He liked to be seen. Those traits don't matter in small operations. After the largest cash robbery in American history, they matter. Burke lived quietly. He drove modest cars. He avoided flashy displays. He understood that attention leads to surveillance, and surveillance leads to prison. Cafora didn't operate that way. He had recently married Joanna. She was young. She wasn't part of the life. She wasn't raised around mob rules. And Cafora talked. That's the critical difference. In organized crime, business is compartmentalized. Wives are kept separate. Details are never shared outside the circle. Cafora broke that separation. He told Joanna about the heist. He talked about money. He talked about his role. That wasn't just careless. It created exposure. And exposure, in the months after Lufthansa, was the one thing Jimmy Burke would not tolerate. By January 1979, people connected to the robbery were already disappearing. Cafora understood that pattern. But he underestimated his own position inside it. Because in his mind he wasn't expendable. He had done time with Burke. He was laundering money. He was useful. What he didn't fully understand was that usefulness is temporary. And after a heist of that size, every man involved eventually becomes a liability. December 24, 1978. 2 weeks after the Lufthansa heist, Robert's Lounge in South Ozone Park was packed. It was the crew's Christmas party. Wives, girlfriends, associates, regulars, drinks flowing, music loud. Everyone celebrating what they believed was the perfect crime. At that moment, no one had been arrested. The FBI had no indictments, and the money had started to circulate. But inside that celebration was something else: tension. Because just days earlier, Parnell Stacks Edwards had already been killed for failing to dispose of the getaway van. That was the first message. Lay low. Don't spend big. Don't attract attention. Jimmy Burke had made that clear to everyone involved. No expensive purchases, no flashy jewelry, no new cars. Nothing that would draw federal attention. The FBI was watching. Burke understood how investigations worked. After a major robbery, agents don't just look for fingerprints. They look for behavior, spending patterns, sudden upgrades in lifestyle. They sit outside known locations. They photograph cars. They track movement. And on Christmas Eve, one car stood out. A brand new 1979 Cadillac Fleetwood, white exterior, pink interior, custom ordered. It cost roughly $15,000, a noticeable purchase in late 1978, especially for a man with no legitimate explanation for sudden wealth. It belonged to Louis Cafora. He didn't hide it. He parked it directly outside Robert's Lounge, under streetlights, in front of a location the FBI already associated with organized crime. When Cafora arrived, he brought Joanna inside. She was wearing a new fur coat, diamond jewelry, visible symbols of money. Burke saw the car. He walked outside. He looked at it. He looked at Cafora, and he said one word: "Congratulations." Then he went back inside. No yelling, no argument, no public confrontation. That was the moment, not because of jealousy, not because of anger, because of visibility. The Cadillac wasn't just a purchase. It was evidence of sudden wealth. And sudden wealth, 2 weeks after the largest robbery in American history, invites scrutiny. Federal agents notice vehicles. They run plates. They check registrations. They build lists. And once your name is on that list, everything you do becomes monitored. Cafora didn't understand that fully. He saw the car as success. Burke saw it as exposure. But the car wasn't the only problem. It was the most visible mistake. The deeper issue was that Cafora was talking. He had told Joanna about the heist. He had explained his role. He had discussed money. In organized crime, wives are intentionally kept separate from business for one reason: insulation. Once civilians know details, risk multiplies. They talk to friends, they argue, they panic, they get questioned, and they don't always stay silent. By January 1979, federal pressure around Lufthansa was increasing. The van had been recovered. Fingerprints had been lifted. Agents were circling. Burke had already begun removing potential liabilities. Cafora had just made himself highly visible. And in Jimmy Burke's world, visibility was the first step toward elimination. The Christmas party wasn't just a celebration. It was a sorting process. Burke was watching, taking note, deciding who could remain useful, and who had become dangerous. By February 1979, Louis Cafora was no longer just a flashy associate with a new car. He was a problem. The FBI had photographed the Cadillac. They had traced the registration. His name was now attached to visible wealth just weeks after the Lufthansa robbery. That alone was dangerous. But there was more. Cafora had been entrusted with laundering large amounts of cash through his parking lot businesses. According to later testimony, he had started holding back more than his share, skimming, living larger than he should have. In Burke's world, stealing from the boss was not a misunderstanding. It was a sentence. At the same time, Cafora had begun to panic. He knew people connected to the heist were disappearing. Stax was dead. Others had vanished. The pattern was obvious. And when men in that position panic, they make desperate moves. Multiple accounts suggest Cafora attempted to make contact with federal authorities. Whether he formally agreed to cooperate or was only exploring the option, it didn't matter. The attempt alone was enough, because once a man considers flipping, he becomes unstable, and instability is intolerable after a robbery of that scale. By early March, Jimmy Burke had reached a conclusion. Cafora knew too much. He was visible, he was talking, he might turn, and he had no rank to protect him. On March 8, 1979, Louis Cafora and Joanna left their apartment in Brooklyn in the white Cadillac. They never arrived anywhere. Henry Hill later claimed the couple was murdered, and the Cadillac was crushed in a Brooklyn scrapyard, compacted with their bodies inside, and melted down. No remains were ever recovered to confirm that account. Whether the car was destroyed with them inside or disposed of separately, the result was the same. Louis Cafora and Joanna disappeared without physical trace. No indictments followed. No murder charges stuck. No bodies surfaced. And Jimmy Burke continued eliminating others connected to Lufthansa until nearly everyone who could link him to it was gone. The Christmas party scene in Goodfellas captures the look on Burke's face when he sees the car. What it doesn't show is what that look meant. It wasn't anger. It was calculation. In that moment, the decision was likely already forming. The pink Cadillac wasn't just a symbol of excess. It was a signal that Louis Cafora had stopped thinking like a survivor. And in Jimmy Burke's world, that mistake didn't lead to an argument. It led to disappearance.